Alrighty, so welcome to the 7th meeting of Big West Rotaract Club. Every 2 weeks, we hear from speakers who tell us about their inspirational stories, expertise in their field, or how they are finding innovative solutions to our world's most pressing challenges. My name is Jane Kwan, and I am president of this club. This week, we have Jolyn Tay, who will talk to us about bee hotels. A little bit about Jolyn. Jolyn Tay is a board-certified entomologist by the Entomological Society of America. She is now based in Singapore after living in the Netherlands, where she penned Insect Hotels, a refuge or a fad. While her specialization is on tropical insects that affect public health and agriculture, Jolyn's passion is also to help people understand insects. We will provide a link to connect with her on LinkedIn after this meeting is posted. Without further ado, here is Jolyn.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jolyn, and I'm really pleased and honored to be invited to speak to Big West Rotaract Club on bee hotels. So thank you, Jane, for the introduction. As what she has introduced, I'm an entomologist, and my specialization are on urban, public health, and agriculture insects. So I started my interest to study bee hotels when I first discovered them in the Netherlands, where I lived a couple of years ago. So from this session, I'm going to walk with you guys through 4 questions. One, first of all, what is a bee hotel? And secondly, which insects will benefit from the concept of bee hotels? And thirdly, why do we do this? And most important part, how can you and I be part of this? So what is the bee hotel? So essentially, a bee hotel is a man-made structures with holes to provide refuge and shelters to bees, as well as other pollinator insects, to be honest. And usually a bee hotel consists of drilled holes on the wood or tubes consisting of bamboo tubes. And as far as the name suggests, the bee hotels actually benefit mostly cavity-dwelling solitary bees. And it's usually the native bees of the state of California. So according to the records from the Entomological Societies of America, there are 4,000 species of bees in USA, and out of these 4,000, 1,600 of them are actually native bees in California alone. And native bees are mostly cavity-dwelling or ground-nesting bees. So a lot of people think about honeybees when we talk about bee hotels, but honeybees are actually not native. They are mostly introduced European honeybee, or in scientific name, Apis mellifera. They were introduced to California about 1850. So it's just one species, and they actually live in hives, so they don't really live in holes or in the hotels. So when we talk about bee hotels, we're actually specifically talking about the solitary native bees that live in holes, such as mining bees, leaf-cutting bees, which I will share more with you later on. And when we look at the big picture, bees makes up a majority of the group of pollinators that we have on this planet. Of course, we have other pollinators as well, which are also important, such as butterfly, moths, flies, beetles, even bats and hummingbirds. So pollination is actually a huge deal in our environment. So the next question is that, why do we do this? Why do we care about providing refuge and shelter to pollinators, especially bees? So 1 out of every 3 bites of vegetables or fruits that we eat every day is actually made possible by pollinators. And secondly, 70 to 75% of the world's flowering plants are dependent on pollinators, because without pollinators, these plants, they can't propagate, they can't flourish, and therefore it will actually impact on not just our crops, but also other ornamental plants as well. And the world, the earth, will cease to be the earth that we used to enjoy. So not only as pollinators, insects, especially bees, they play a big part of our food web as predator, prey, and even scavenger. So in other words, they actually hold the balance of our natural ecosystem. So here's the problem that we have right now on this planet, is that we are losing our insects at an alarming rate, like no kidding. So this revelation was first introduced by a group of researchers in Germany in October 2017, when they have presented their paper published in plus online. In this paper, they shared that after 25 years of observation in nature reserve across Germany, they realized that 3/4 of flying insects have vanished, means the population has dropped so tremendously. And actually, it does have serious implication to life on Earth. And that is just the beginning of many revelations that scientists have exposed. And the most recent one was by a scientist, Brad Lister. So according to Brad Lister, he's been doing this study, and what happens that after 35 years, he returned to this Puerto Rican rainforest just to discover that 98% of the ground insect has vanished. So the Germany discovered that the flying insects were gone. Scientists based in Puerto Rico has discovered that ground insects has vanished. So we are losing insects in every place all over the world. And the funny thing is that insects may seem small and insignificant to all of us, and sometimes we hate insects too. We think that they're pests, we sometimes get afraid of them, but the thing is that of the entire group of insects in our animal kingdom, those pests, they just make a very small population to the big category of insects that are beneficial to us. So it is our duty and responsibility to actually protect these insects. And we are losing them through so many different ways. We are losing them to global warming. We are losing them to depletion of rainforests and natural environments, and our overuse of pesticides and chemicals in our surrounding. These things affect our insects, both, especially our beneficial insects. So with that revelation, our next question is that, what can I do to help? I mean, true, to be honest, we humans are the real reason why these changes happen so quickly. So what can you and I be part of this solution? So I'm going to walk us through 4 key steps that we can adapt to our daily lifestyle so that we can protect and provide shelter to these very insects we call our friends. So I'm going to start with the first step is to grow plants. So growing plants, it can be done anywhere. You can do it in your garden if you have a garden. But if you are like me, a young professional who probably don't live in a garden, I mean, in a house with a garden, you can actually grow them on flower pots, on balcony. So there's so many options of what you can grow, but I highly, highly recommend growing native plants that are local to the state of California, because you don't want to accidentally introduce an exotic plants that may seem pretty to you, but they are not natural in your environment, in this case, the West Coast. So why do we want to grow plants? Why do you want to start gardening? Because if you want to shelter these insects, especially bees, you need to provide them a food source. So here we are talking about pollen and nectar. We need to provide food for them, because it's like building a hotel but without restaurant, without food service. So same thing to them. And there's so many options of what you can grow in your backyard or on your balcony, ranging from trees all the way to perennial or annual flowers. And in case you're wondering, what kind of flowers can I grow? UC Davis Arboretum and Public Garden has amazing database that you can go search online. And I've already provided the link at the last slide at the end of the session, so you can click on that link and check out what plants you can grow. So here are some examples I can show you. We have this beautiful island pink yarrow, a Vinea manzanita, and a golden currant. And all these 3 are the common example of California native plants that you can consider growing that from your flower pots or from your garden if you have a garden. So grow native plants, that's the key thing. And second, very important point is to limit or to avoid using pesticides. When we talk about pesticide, we're not just talking about insecticide, but we also talk about herbicides and fungicides, which are quite common things that people use on their gardens. And I highly recommend doing away with them, because while the intention is very straightforward, you use them because you want to keep away the insects or the animals or the plants that you don't want them in your environment. These same items are actually counter-infective as well, because not only they repel or kill the insects or the or the plants that you want to get rid of, they also affect the beneficial ones as well, like the bees and good plants, good insects. And also by using those chemicals, we are also disrupting the natural balance that we try to achieve in our backyard or in this micro environment that you're trying to create on your balcony. So that's why I advise try not to use any pesticide at all. And of course, that's the next question. What if I have unwanted insects like cockroaches and houseflies in my house? What do I do with them if I'm not supposed to use pesticides, right? So here's what I can share as an entomologist. Have a very good housekeeping. It sounds very easy, but a lot of people have no idea how important this small step can do to the peace of your mind. Like animals, insects and pests like cockroaches, houseflies, and rats. The reason why they want to come into our house is because we have food for them. We have unwashed dishes left lying around in the sink. We have food stain in the microwave oven, on the floor, on the kitchen counter. We have trash rotting in a bin that we haven't cleared for days or even weeks. So these things actually attract them more. So if we practice basic good housekeeping, we can actually discourage these pests from coming to our house in the first place, hence avoiding the need to have pesticide anyway. But hey, sometimes, excuse me, with the best of intention, you probably still have pests, right? Then you'll be wondering, what can I do to get rid of them? I need to get rid of them after all. My advice is that look for environment-friendly options. Don't go straight to the store and buy an aerosol. Go get something environment-friendly like diatomaceous earth, some silica sand, or even some basic common sense like sealing up holes where these critters can come through. Like example, if you have a hole in your ceiling where rats can go through, straightforward, seal up that hole, cement it, put a net, whatever, seal that hole. So sometimes small steps like that, they are actually chemical free, and once you fix that, it's actually a long-term solution. And for some people who are big fan of essential oils, I have no great knowledge of essential oils. Some people actually recommend using essential oils as repellents or even as pesticide. I mean, something that can kill them. I suggest you to do your homework, ask professionals who are experts in essential oils to recommend you the best mixture for that option. Of course, as an absolute last resort, if you're really in a dire situation where you need to call for help and you need to use chemicals, get a professional. A professional pest control company are trained, licensed groups of people who know and who can recommend appropriate solution depending on your house. So consult these guys. They will give you the best advice they can offer you to solve that problem based on your situation. Like for example, if you tell them you have a child in your house, they will advise you what kind of option you can use. If you tell them you have a pet or you have a garden growing in your house, they will give you a friendlier option. So always look out for this guy, because the professional pest control are not just necessarily spray chemicals. They actually give you a more well-rounded, holistic approach to a pest problem that you have. So this is how you can limit or avoid using pesticides in your environment. And of course, the biggest topic is the next step, building a bee hotel or a bee sanctuary. So here's a picture I'd like to share with you. This is what I call a bee condo. Looks impressive, right? The problem is that it is not recommended. A lot of experts recommend against building massive structures like bee condos for a lot of reasons. I mean, it looks great for school project or even your community project, but it's not recommended. Why? Because these kind of structures, without proper maintenance, they can create problems with parasites and mold. So the thing is that solitary bees, when they live in those kind of holes, they are actually, there's a reason why they're called solitary bees. They don't live in a large group. So when you build large structures like that, you can still encourage them to nest inside. But one is like in a unnaturally high population, it will attract parasites like parasitic wasps or mites. They will actually attack the larvae and the adults and causing them to die in an alarming rate. So all you need is one nesting block that's infested or infected. It will spread to the entire condo. So when it's not taken care properly, you end up wiping the entire population, which is kind of ironic considering that we want to protect them in the first place. So that's why I highly recommend something that's small and simple, like this bee hotel I have in my neighborhood. So all you need is untreated natural wood without paint or preservatives or any other chemicals, and you just have to get suitable drill bit according to the size that you want. I'll tell you in a lot more detail at the end of the session. Have cleanly drilled holes so that you don't have splinters inside that might harm the bees that try to get into. And most importantly, rain protection. As you can see from the example, they have roof that allows the rainwater to drip off without coming in contact with the nesting blocks. And most importantly, no plastic. Why am I bringing this up? Because you might encounter some DIY manuals or gardening stores that actually feature bee hotels that have plastic tubes on it. The intention is that they treat it like an ant farm. They want to allow you to see the bees nesting. But the reason why I don't recommend it is, number one, is not environment friendly, first of all. And secondly, they are actually rain tight. In other words, they don't allow moisture to dissipate. So what happens is it collects moisture inside the tube and you create mold. And mold to bees is like disease to us. Like how we have fungal infection on our feet, bees can get mold infection as well. So plastics actually encourage mold growth because they don't allow moisture to dissipate. So no plastic. And the next part I would like to introduce is looking at the bigger picture and build a sanctuary. Like instead of looking at building small little hotels, you can look at the bigger picture and build a sanctuary. So if you have a garden, you can actually try this. The reason why I bring up about bee sanctuaries is because to sustain a healthy population, it's not just the bee hotel, it's the food which comes from the garden, the plants that you grow, a little bit of water, and some nesting ground, not just in the bee hotel, but also in the ground. Like for example, some species of bees like bumblebees and mining bees, they actually burrow underground to nest. They don't live in holes like in bee hotels. So have a variety of them actually creates a proper sanctuary for them. So like a quick tip, you can read more about it in the reference I will share with you later. You clear an open spot in a sunny location of your garden about 2 feet across so that you can expose the soil free of vegetation, a little bit of sand, a little sand loam so that it's fast draining and lightly compact so that the bees like bumblebees and mining bees, they can actually burrow in and build a nest inside. Or you can actually dig a hole and fill it up with a mixture of fine horticultural sand and loam. And if you live in a garden, in a balcony, you have a balcony, you don't have a garden, you want to give it a try, you can actually try with a container with sand and loam mixture, and then you just put it at the corner of your balcony together with all that potted plants that you added on. So this is an example of how a sanctuary will look like. It's not just a bee hotel, but it's an ecosystem of food, water, and shelter. There's a mixture of ground and holes. So this is a rough example, a step-by-step construction of a bee hotel. These pictures are taken from a friend of mine, Mark Carter. Mark Carter is a bee hotel expert from the UK. He has extensive knowledge. So this is just to give you an illustration how it looks like when you build it. So as always, untreated wood consisting of a roof system to avoid rainwater, and nesting blocks of drilled wood or bamboos. And you can tell that it's just a simple structure, nothing fancy. It doesn't have to be fancy because if you try to make it fancy, you end up adding paint and chemicals on it instead. So more information on the last page of the slide, which I'll share with you later. And the most important thing when it comes to protecting our bees is maintenance. A lot of times people talk about building bee hotels, planting amazing flowers, but they all forget about maintenance, which is very important because it's a long-term process. It's not a project that has an end date. It's actually a marathon where you continue to evolve and grow together with the bees and the flowers that you plant. So first thing first, take care of your plants. If you keep your plants healthy and well, your pollinators will be happy and healthy too. And secondly, always inspect on your bee hotel, especially at the end of summer, just to see whether there's any dead cells among nesting box. Why I say so? Because if you see any dead cells, you want to clean them up and remove the dead bee or the dead larva so that you don't encourage mites or mold to grow inside on the dead bodies. So that's what's the reference I presented at the end of the session will actually include signs to look out for when you try to look for dead cells. And thirdly, because your bee hotel is made of untreated natural wood, it's very normal that they will degrade over time, usually in a span of 2 years. And you can tell when they are ready to go. So always replace your nesting block every 2 years with fresh, untreated natural wood so that it will continue to attract bees to nest in your bee hotel. Because if you don't replace them, it just gets too old and not conducive for the bees to go in, and you end up having an empty nest season after season. And of course, last but not least, for those who have a garden and you build a sanctuary, do not over manicure. I mean, when I say over manicure, I'm talking about over pruning, over mowing, and all that. It's okay to have a little bit of mess, which is great because you guys can be very busy with your professional work. You don't have time to manicure your garden anyway. Just make sure that when you cut your grass, don't cut it too often and don't cut it too short because you might disrupt the ground nest of the bumblebees and the mining bees. That's one example. And if you over prune, you probably accidentally over prune parts of the plant, especially with the flowers that the bees and the pollinators try to reach out for nectar and pollen as well. So this is the basic steps that you can do for your maintenance. So this is the last slide, and this is a list of reference that I've compiled for your future use. I mean, half of this reference is actually based on the West Coast climate and native species, very helpful. So I encourage you guys to read up on them, try to find options, what you can do to nurture pollinators in your environment. And if you want to know how to build and how to maintain them, the last link at the bottom by Mark Carlson, which is fortlies.com, has a very detailed, comprehensive tips on how to build and maintain them. Thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you so much. That was astounding. Yeah, well, it was just so interesting. And thank you in particular for really catering it to California. Obviously you're in Singapore and you have very different insects and things, so I found that really educational. I'm gonna open it up for questions now. So if anyone has questions, please remember to unmute yourself. I know, Tessa, that you're currently muted, but you're possibly driving, so let me know if you need me to unmute you. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them now.
Hi, Jolyn. I think I'm unmuted. Maybe someone can confirm. Okay.
Hi.
Sweet. Hi, this is Vanessa again. Thank you so much. That was super interesting and super fascinating. I feel like just something that like many of us listening on the phone wouldn't, have had the opportunity to learn something like that. So it's really cool to hear your insight. My question may be a little bit more personal, but how did you get involved with bee hotels, and kind of what made you, how did you find, the work that you're doing now, and, what brought you to the Netherlands and then now to Singapore? How did that transition go for you, and how did you find your passion in this?
That's a very good question, Vanessa. Thanks for asking. So I've always been an entomologist as a profession I studied entomology as a graduate student and all that. So so insects has always been a core part of my vocation. So long story short, I was given an opportunity to go on sabbatical for 2 years in the Netherlands. And so I was living in The Hague, but I would go to Amsterdam a lot. And when I was in Netherlands, that was where I discovered bee hotels for the first time. When I meant first time, I meant that I've never seen a bee hotel in Asia. I've never seen a bee hotel in Asia before because I'm actually Malaysian, but I used to move around between Singapore, Malaysia, and so forth. So moving to Europe actually opened my eyes, and I got fascinated. But of course, being someone with a research background, I find it important not just to be fascinated with something that's new and something that sounds like a breakthrough, but also to study the pros and cons and what's the idea is all about. So I did an in-depth study. I studied the pros, I studied cons, I studied about this trend, this development of the trend, and what has happened, what could go wrong and what could go right. And that's how I came up with my article, which is titled Inside Hotels, is it a refuge or a fad? So because I would like to bring attention that a lot of people can make mistakes with bee hotels. They thought that just go to the garden store, buy something that's cute and pink and blue and just hang it there. And then they will be wondering, why no bee want to live in that piece of hotel? And at the same time, we have people who build massive bee condos, and then they suddenly wonder why suddenly all of them die in one day or in 1 week. So there's a lack of awareness about doing it properly. Like same with any fad, it's very important. I feel like it's very important to disseminate that information. So after I did my study about Inside Hotel, that's why I started going around sharing that knowledge to educate people that not just bee hotels are important, but it's also very important to do it right and to maintain it. So yeah, I hope that answers your questions.
She muted herself, but I'm sure it did.
Oh, okay. Never mind. So yeah, that's.
Hi, yeah, that was great. Sorry, I always like to mute myself because in case I'm like background noise and stuff. But that was awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Tessa, I'm going to unmute you manually. If you don't have a question, no worries, but just just so that I can do that.
Hi, sorry, I'm driving. I actually did have a question. So obviously this was all a conversation about bees, but is it equally important to be creating habitats for other pollinating animals such as butterflies?
Yes, you are right. So the topic of today's session is to focus on bee hotels. But actually, if you ask me, my personal opinion, I look at the bigger picture. That's why I'm in the later part of the session, I did talk about creating a sanctuary. This sanctuary actually encompasses all other living things that play a part in pollinator. So if you create a sanctuary with plants, a little bit of water, a little bit of nesting soil or ground or medium, you're not only encouraging the bees of both types, but you're also encouraging butterflies and flies. I mean, not house flies, but like specific flies, they are actually pollinators as well. So the real key message is that we need to recreate natural environment in our urban space, because the problem is that our urban space is taking over the natural environment. That's why when I began my session, my first point was to grow plants, because growing plants is the first step to everything when it comes to preserving our animals or insects. But that's a very good point, and I hope everybody is aware that it's not just about protecting bees, but protecting everything in general. And growing plants is always a very important fundamental step to the whole picture.
Thank you.
Perfect.
And I forgot to add on, so far the guides I've included is meant for bee hotels, but actually if you search on the internet, there's a lot of tips on how to create sanctuaries for butterflies, to encourage hummingbirds, to encourage, if you're not afraid of bats. There's actually a lot of useful resources out there on the internet. If you Google specifically for other insects or other animals, you actually will find them, and they will see similar concept like grow more plants, don't over manicure your environment, don't use pesticide. The fundamentals are still there. Whereas the only difference is that the specific structure that you try to build. So I encourage you to go out there and take a look. Plenty of helpful resources. Thanks.
Perfect. And just lastly, I have a question as well. I was curious, so you really did talk about maintenance for the bee hotels, and I was just curious because I am a little afraid of bees. I'm not gonna lie. I know how important they are to our ecosystem, and to us in general as well. But did you have any, I guess, suggestions for when you are trying to do maintenance and you have, maybe one of the holes has one of these bees that you know, have passed away, but then the others are active with, you know, live bees, how to kind of navigate through that.
Okay, so your question actually requires two different type of answer. I'll start with the fear of bee first, then I'll talk about the cleaning up part. So it's very common for people to have natural fear of insects. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, some people have entomophobia, or some people just naturally afraid. I'm not surprised. So if you are an apartment dweller or a homeowner who really wants to do their part but afraid of bees, or potentially you know that you have a severe allergic reaction to bee stings, very, very valid reason. What you can do is that focus on growing plants only. Focus on growing plants, because these bees or pollinators, they can come from other places and hang around in your garden just to get their food and pollen and nectar, and then they will go back where they shelter. So for those who are not so keen to have the bees living in their living space, just focus on growing plants, and that should be sufficient, because it's more important to grow more plants than to build more bee hotels. So for those like you who naturally afraid, it's a valid fear, just focus on growing plants. So that's first question answered. Second question, yeah, I didn't touch on that in detail because it will require an entire day of session to touch every single aspect, but just the gist of it. The reason why I asked to inspect every end of summer or every at the end of summer or beginning of autumn, is because that's where all the insects cease their activity. They start to go in the overwintering mode. They start to go into hibernation mode. So in other words, they are not buzzing around anymore. They are already settling down. So that's the best time for you to actually inspect the insect hotel to see which one are dead and which one are alive. The ones that are alive and doing pretty well, the nesting hole, the drill hole will actually have a mud closure to it, and it looks intact. You can tell there's someone inside and they're resting very well. But the ones that are dead are usually the ones that are either empty but with some debris inside, or with a mud covering, but there's a pinpoint hole. There's a hole. You can tell that there's a hole inside the mud. It's usually because it was made by a parasitic wasp. So you see that hole, you know that cell is a goner. So this is the part where you remove them gently. You start taking them out. You can use forceps or a simple brush just to gently remove them without disrupting all the other cells. Just remove them gently, because the key is that you want to remove the dead body. You don't want mold, you don't want mites to grow on dead bodies. So just remove them gently and then put away. I understand that California winter is not harsh. It's not like in northern part where it can be very wet, very dry. Either very wet, very dry, but one thing for sure, very cold. So if you find yourself in a very harsh winter, not wood, take them, put in your garden shed or in an indoor area to allow them to overwinter in a safe environment. But otherwise, just leave them in the nesting frame. They should be fine. Like, yeah, so I think in West Coast, especially in California, you don't have that kind of winter, do you?
No, not really. Except for this. So the season has been very wet, I will say. You know, globally.
Yeah. So the wet part is the part you might want to take care. You just take them away so that they don't get wet, cold outside. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the website I provided at the bottom. I mean, at the last slide will actually tells you the recommended timeline or what temperature or how you should keep them to help them overwinter to the next season. Yeah.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. Well, thank you once again, JoLynn, for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So our next meeting will be our next meeting will be the week of March 19th with guest speaker Brandon Choswiski, who will speak to us about Edwin's Leadership and Restaurant Institute, a unique approach at giving formerly incarcerated adults a foundation in the hospitality industry while providing a support network necessary for a successful reentry. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you in a few weeks. That concludes the Big West Rotaract 7th meeting of its first year. Meeting adjourned.
Okay.